Good morning on this Sunday morning, the 11th of December, 6 days away from the fateful 55th National Conference of the African National Congress that will start on the 16th of December, which is also the birth date of the ANC's Liberation Army of Umkhonto we Sizwe that was formed on the 16th of December 1961. I'm doing this early morning YouTube live link up because I believe that we have reached a crossroads, truly a tipping point, and that it is now critical that we must understand the circumstances in which we find ourselves. The African National Congress is in a deep existential crisis. Cyril Ramaphosa has plunged us into this crisis because he and his mafia-like acolytes, who managed to infiltrate the African National Congress on a long-term plan, which was part of white monopoly capitalism and imperialism's plan to infiltrate, to hollow out the African National Congress and use the ANC in the most insidious fashion as their instrument to destroy the liberation ideals and hopes of our people. Ramaphosa has been a long-term project of white monopoly capitalism in South Africa. Right from its youth, we can follow the history of this man as a student who was funded by the big mining companies, as someone who was brought into the urban foundation, in the words of Irene Menell, the wife of Clive Menell, the second largest mining company in South Africa, of whom Clive Menell was the owner and chief executive, Angloval. Irene Menell called Cyril Ramaphosa and him being brought into the Urban Foundation a charitable project. She also referred to it as their insurance policy to ensure that in the future, when Cyril becomes a leader and hopefully the president of the ANC and of South Africa, white monopoly capitalism will not lose their control over the economy, that the big mining conglomerates will be able to continue to remain in control. We also know that this was the clearly worked out plan of Anglo-American and of Harry Oppenheimer. That is why Harry Oppenheimer assisted Cyril Ramaphosa to start the National Union of Mine Workers and financed the first offices of the NUM. The NUM was never meant to truly and fundamentally challenge the grip of the mining companies on our South African economy, was never meant to remove that grip and to give control of our mineral resources to the majority of Black and especially African people. Never in your life. It was created as an instrument to manage and control the increasing radicalism of the mine workers. And in that sense, Cyril Ramaphosa was Harry Oppenheimer, Clive Menell, and the rest of the mining industries, man to prevent any radical change from happening. He was truly their house nigger. Now, I don't need to beat around the bush today. We know what happened during the last 5 years of Ramaphosa's presidency of the African National Congress and of our country. Our country has been plunged into one crisis after the other. We have seen the worst corruption since 1994 with the misappropriation and theft of the COVID-19 relief funds, over 15 billion rands. The South African government and our country has been plunged into the worst international debts imaginable. We are today in debt to the IMF and the World Bank to a tune that we could never have imagined. We will never be able to pay those debts back in our lifetime, and even our children will fail to do so. This is the tragedy that we are faced with. This is the brink to which Ramaphosa brought us, with the destruction of the state-owned enterprises. We know what happened with SAA, sold for a pithy 51 rands, while the assets of SAA are worth billions of rands. We are sitting here this morning under level 5 of load shedding. We don't know, it will move up and down between 5, 6, then down to 3, then back to 6. Load shedding has now become institutionalized. It has become part of our lives. This is done deliberately. Ramaphosa is ensuring that we do not have energy security, that Eskom is being destroyed, that our ability to have power and electricity security through our coal-fired power stations is being destroyed. He went to COP27, he traveled to various Western European countries and the United States of America, and promised that he will ensure that renewable and so-called green energy will become the norm in South Africa, that he will decommission our coal power stations. He is in the process of exporting our most and high quality coal to Western Europe and to the United States of America. When you go to Richards Bay, there is a traffic jam of rail trucks taking the best coal that we have in South Africa and exporting it to those Western nations. Those Western nations like Germany and France and the United Kingdom are returning to coal as the base for their security of energy supply, while we are being moved away from it. And it is our coal, our high-grade coal, that is being used for that purpose. In the meantime, the worst kind of quality, the lowest grade coal, is being put in the furnaces and turbines of our coal-powered electricity stations. They are collapsing. They are blowing up because of this poor quality coal that is being fed in there. We hear that today we do not have energy security. We hear today that we do not have the money, and Eskom doesn't have the money to continue to buy diesel for the diesel furnaces that they burn to even keep us at this level of level 6, level 4 and 5 of load shedding. This is the crisis that we are in. In addition to that, we have seen the Phala Phala farm gate scandal. Cyril Ramaphosa clearly having been involved in criminal activity. The president of this country having huge amounts of illicit foreign exchange of the United States dollars hidden away on his farm, not having declared that illicit foreign exchange to the South African Reserve Bank and to the South African Revenue Service. On the side, as a side hustle, still being involved in selling of animals on his Phala Phala farm and other farms, being involved in side business, while our constitution and our ethics code says that the president of this country may not have a second job, may not have a second source of income. We have seen how the ANC and our country, our South African government, has been made the laughing stock in the international community. We are on the front pages of the newspapers and on the television screens of the world being made a joke. And yet Ramaphosa and his acolytes are pushing forth to control the African National Congress further. He's using the huge resources at his disposal, the power that he has, the patronage that he has, to intimidate and cower the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress. During the last 2 weeks, we've seen the despicable display of a lack of courage and backbone from our National Executive Committee. One meeting after the other being postponed or stumbling ahead. Decisions cannot be taken. Running away from facing the decision of the independent panel that had been appointed by Parliament to investigate the Phala Phala Farmgate scandal. That panel that found that Cyril Ramaphosa has a serious prima facie case to answer. And yet, the National Executive Committee of the ANC, after several postponed meetings, finally decided that they will instruct the ANC members of Parliament to vote against the report of the independent panel, to protect Cyril Ramaphosa, to support him on having gone on the review of that report, although the legal grounds to do so are non-existent. And the last couple of days, we were treated once again to the spectacle, last Friday especially, of the National Executive Committee of the ANC pathetically not being able to deal with the report of the Integrity Committee of the ANC about the Phala Phala Farmgate scandal. We haven't been able to get access to that report, although rumor tells us that the Integrity Committee said that Ramaphosa should step down as president of the ANC. But the NEC doesn't have the guts to take that decision. Instead, that bully who's the chairperson of the National Executive Committee, Gwede Mantashe, intervened during the discussions in the NEC last Friday, while there were still a number of NEC members who wanted to speak. Among them also the former president of the country and president of the African National Congress, Comrade Thabo Mbeki. He prevented them from speaking when he saw that the discussion was not going in exactly the way where he wanted it to go. In order to take a decision to protect Cyril Ramaphosa and to prevent the Integrity Committee's report from being tabled, he just closed the discussion. He just said a decision had been taken. And that decision that they took was simply to kick the report of the Integrity Committee forward, to kick it now to the conference, to put the pressure now on over 4,000 delegates in that conference, the National 55th Conference of the African National Congress, to discuss that report in the report of the Deputy President of the ANC that he will present to the conference. Evidently, it won't be possible for such a large number of people to thoroughly discuss that report. Evidently, this is just a way to try and push the report even beyond the conference, to try and cover up, to prevent accountability for Cyril Ramaphosa. We have seen how those of us who've raised our concerns about this disastrous state of affairs in the African National Congress, myself and others who have protested outside the NEC meetings at Nazareth and stood there with placards saying that Ramaphosa must go, that those of us were attacked by thugs, by Rent a Crowd, who were brought in last Monday by Benjani Chauke and his brother, paid hundreds of rands to come, given free food and t-shirts, and told to attack me and the other comrades who were there, told to shout us down, to prevent us from having our voice and our right to freedom of speech. But we continue to stand. I continue to stand there. I continue to insist that I will deliver the message that the only way in which the African National Congress can now be saved, the only way in which our country can be saved, is for Ramaphosa to go. This week, as I've said, is the critical week. It is the crossroads. If we fail to remove Cyril Ramaphosa and his mafia-like gang from the leadership of the African National Congress. If Ramaphosa and that mafia gang manages to once again, like they've done in 2017 at the then 54th National Conference, if they manage to once again bribe and buy and push and intimidate their way into the leadership and a second term for Ramaphosa in the African National Congress, the sad day will have arrived that the ANC will collapse and disintegrate. I say this with the heaviest of hearts. It breaks my heart as a member of the African National Congress, a veteran member of 43 years of uninterrupted service to the ANC, as someone who worked in the underground for the African National Congress and for Mkhonto Sizwe, who paid the price, who lost my family, who went to prison, who was tortured and eventually sentenced to prison in 1983, as someone who dedicated my whole adult life to the liberation struggle and to the African National Congress. It breaks my heart to say this, but it has to be said. We cannot beat around the bush about this for 1 millisecond any further. If this mafia Phala Phala mattress gang of Cyril Ramaphosa returns to power in 6 days' time at the 55th National Congress, if Cyril Ramaphosa, by hook or by crook, is once again fraudulently elected as president of the ANC, and if on the 20th of December, it is Ramaphosa who closes the ANC's 55th National Conference, it is over for the ANC. It will have reached the end of its liberation struggle history, of its dedication to the people of our country, of its service, of being the leader of society. It will disintegrate and collapse under the weight of the incongruity of having a criminal and an agent of white monopoly capitalism to continue to be in control of this former great, illustrious, oldest liberation movement on the African continent. Let me state it unequivocally clear. I and many other members of the African National Congress will not be able to countenance such an outcome. I cannot talk for anyone else, but I can certainly talk for myself. And when I do so as a soldier, as a commander of Mkhonto Sizwe, as a veteran member of the African National Congress. I will not be able to continue to be under the presidency, the corrupt, bought, bribed, imposed presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa in the African National Congress. So this week will determine that future. It is now or never. It is truly sekunjalu. Either the ANC and the rank and file members of the African National Congress and the delegates of the ANC who are going to the 55th National Conference of the ANC will take the right decisions and save the African National Congress, or the ANC will be destroyed. We are already seeing what Ramaphosa and his acolytes are doing, how they are now in control of the administration of the African National Congress after they've also forced the Secretary General and many other comrades out of the Secretary General's office, which is the engine room of the ANC. We've seen what they've done by removing many ANC comrades, people of integrity, who have been nominated by the branches, who have received enough votes to manage to pass the threshold. They've been removed from the election nomination lists that had been presented by Kgalema Motlanthe and his elections committee. That committee is committing elections fraud. Those lists are not representative of what happened during the nomination process in our branches throughout the country. In addition to that, they are misinterpreting the ANC constitution. They are contravening the constitution, the national constitution of our country. In the decisions that they've taken, that comrades such as Comrade Batabile Dlamini and Comrade Tony Ngeni and others cannot stand for any position in the National Executive Committee of the ANC. In the case of Comrade Tony, they've now suddenly retrospectively decided to use the previous offense for which he had been found guilty and for which he served a short sentence against him. After he had been allowed since to serve in a number of national executive committees of the ANC, suddenly now he is being removed. It cannot be that retrospectively the law is being implemented and someone is being victimized. In the case of Comrade Batabile Dlamini, she was given the option of a fine. She had not had to serve any sentence. Our own constitution states that if you haven't served a minimum sentence of 6 months, if you haven't been imprisoned, you've simply been given an option of a fine for having been found guilty by a court. You can continue to serve as a member of parliament. Now, it is incongruous that on the one side, you can continue to serve as a national representative in our National Assembly, but you cannot serve on the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress. This has got nothing to do with the law. It has got nothing to do with justice. It has got nothing to do with fighting corruption. It has got everything to do with factional triumphalism, with inequality before the law, with victimizing people, with persecution. In my own instance, the National Disciplinary Committee of the ANC had brought a disciplinary charge, a trumped-up charge against me. A silly little piffy charge that I had said that our judiciary has shown itself to be captured. Something that had been said by many other leaders of the African National Congress. Among them, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu. All of them, none of them are charged, but I have been charged for that trumped-up charge. In the meantime, the National Disciplinary Committee of the ANC continued to drag my disciplinary hearings out time after time. They wanted to bring Fikile Mbalula as a so-called star witness. Can you imagine? But every time we met on Zoom platforms, one disciplinary committee hearing after the other, Mbalula was not available. Even when they wanted to get a signed affidavit from Mbalula, he did not even bother to sign that affidavit. Because the intention was never simply to have this national disciplinary hearing done and dusted. The intention was to drag it out, to make sure that it will continue until the 55th National Conference come, and then to use that totally unconstitutional rule that had been adopted by the National Executive Committee of the ANC to say that since I have a disciplinary charge against me, I am not eligible to stand as a candidate for the National Executive Committee of the ANC. So despite the fact that I have received many votes, many nominations from branches, that I reached the threshold, the ANC membership who said they want me as a candidate for the National Executive Committee of the ANC are being prevented to have me on the basis of this persecution, of those kangaroo court deliberately dragged out hearings of the National Disciplinary Committee. Today, as I sit here, I'm waiting for the National Disciplinary Committee to tell me whether they have found me guilty of any contravention of the ANC's constitution. If they found me guilty of that trumped up charge. In the meantime, myself and other comrades, as I've said, Comrade Tony Ngeni, Comrade Batabile Dlamini, and of course, the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Comrade Ace Magashule, through the ridiculous setting aside resolution that had been rewritten by Ramaphosa and his supporters in the National Executive Committee of the ANC, rewritten to totally change the spirit, the language of the resolution that was adopted at the 54th National Conference, with one intention, and that is to target especially Comrade Ace Magashule, but also other members of the African National Congress, amongst them also the former mayor of eThekwini, all of them, Comrade Sandile Gumede, Comrade Bongani Bongu, to target them so that they will be excluded from being able to serve in the National Executive Committee of the ANC and to be candidates for this upcoming conference. Of course, the main intention was to remove Comrade Ace Magashule from the engine room of the ANC before this 55th National Conference, so that they can do exactly what is unfolding now. The manipulation of lists, the manipulation of delegates who are coming to the conference, the undermining of the democratic processes with one deliberate intention: to return Cyril Ramaphosa and his agents of white monopoly capitalism back to the leadership of the African National Congress and to finally succeed in destroying the ANC. This is where we are right now on this Sunday morning, 6 days away from the start of the 55th National Conference. This is a deep, fundamental, existential crisis that the African National Congress is faced with. If these thugs who have been doing all these things that I've just shared with you, that I've just explained, if this Phala Phala farm gate thug, mafia boss that Cyril Ramaphosa is going to manage to prevent the National Assembly from voting on Tuesday, the 13th of December, that the report of the independent panel must be adopted. If he's going to manage to take that report without the necessary legal grounds to do so on the review, if he's in fact, as president of this country, going to fight his own parliament and ask for the decisions of his own parliament to be taken on the review, if all of this abortive, despicable actions are going to be able to be achieved and allowed to happen, it is over. It is Ichabod for the African National Congress. And then sadly, heartbreakingly so, Ramaphosa will have succeeded in the objective with which he had first been planted as an agent inside the African National Congress, to destroy the ANC. I and many committed comrades who want to see the ANC from being destroyed, who want to see the ANC survive, who want to see the ANC regain its former glory as liberation movement, will do everything possible within our means during these last 6 days to avoid such a disastrous outcome. We will pull out all the stops. We will not refrain from taking all the necessary action to resist such an outcome. I will certainly be there on the 13th of December, together with thousands of other concerned South Africans, members of the ANC, people from the religious community, civil society, the trade union movement, on the steps of Parliament, demanding that the report of the independent panel must be adopted and that the impeachment process against Cyril Ramaphosa must commence. We will definitely in this week push as hard as possible, continue to challenge the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress that Ramaphosa must be removed now, that Ramaphosa should not be allowed to be a candidate for any position, and most definitely not for the position of president of the ANC in this upcoming conference, that he should not even be allowed to be there as a delegate in that conference, that he has lost the right to enter that conference venue, that he should be persona non grata. We will push. On the 16th of December, when the ANC conference convenes at Nasrec, Umkhonto we Sizwe veterans will be there outside Nasrec, there at the gates, together with many other concerned South African citizens and members of the African National Congress from throughout the country, demanding that Ramaphosa cannot be a candidate for any position in the NEC, demanding that the right decisions must be taken by the delegates there in the conference in order to save the ANC. We will be there. We will state our case. We will not cower. We will not divert from this clarion call, this clarion message that we are delivering. You can be sure that we will be there. But if all of this fails, if the crookery, the manipulation, the use of money, millions, if not billions of rands, succeed, and Ramaphosa manages to take control of that conference, manages to turn it into its own corrupt vessel, to use it cynically again as a tool to advance himself, and therefore also to advance the interests of white monopoly capitalism and materialism, then the African National Congress will plunge into the depths of destruction. It will lose its reason to exist, its reason d'être, and it will disintegrate. There is no way, sadly so, but we have to say this, we have to say it so that everyone in this country can know it and no one can say we haven't said it before this conference commenced. There is no way that the African National Congress can survive a continuation of the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa, a continuation of Cyril Ramaphosa's supporters on the leadership, on the national executive of the ANC. If that happens, it will be Ichabod, finish and clar. It will be the end of the African National Congress. So these 6 days will determine the outcome. And all of us have a duty to now do everything possible to conjure up every bit of energy, every bit of commitment, every bit of integrity that we have to avoid such a disastrous outcome. Because truly, the consequences will be too ghastly to contemplate. I therefore call on all my comrades, on all concerned progressive democratic South Africans, to rise this week and to avoid such a disaster from happening. Now more than ever, the clarion call of a luta continua must be heard through the length and the breadth of this country, in every corner of our country. A luta continua.